Hi, I'm Dr. Renee Milton, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. And what I'm going to do today is we're going to do some screen sharing. I want to go over a particular section of scripture in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 16 through 23. And I think it's a very important point of scripture because it has to do with Christian unity. A lot of people misunderstand Christian unity. They really feel that either no one can agree with anyone, and so we'll all just stay in our separate little boxes, and that there is never going to be any Christian unity until we get to heaven. Well, one of the things Christ taught us is that Christian unity depends on us and our attitudes toward one another. If we constantly feel that the only thing we can do is separate from people we don't agree with on certain lines of scripture, then there will be no Christian unity. So here is, my phrase is coming out. So here is one of the things that I want to talk about today. So let's go to do a little screen sharing. And we're just going to start out with our usual. I don't have my music today, but we're going to start out with our usual 1 Corinthians. There we go. There's a little sound effect there. Our opening. So let's read this scripture. Do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If any man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, and that is what you are. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you thinks he is wise in this age, he must become foolish, so that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness before God. For it is written, he is the one who catches the wise in their craftiness. Verse 20, and again, the Lord knows the reasonings of the wise, that they are useless. So then, let no one boast in men, for all things belong to you, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas, or the world, or life, or death, or things present or things to come, all things belong to you, and you belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God. Just to backtrack just a little bit, one of the things that Paul is trying to get across here is their argument about who baptized whom is ridiculous. They were starting to divide over who they were baptized by. And he says in the second chapter, I'm thankful I didn't baptize any of you, but all I did was come in and preach the gospel. So in this third chapter, he's starting to tell them how carnal they are. And one point that's really important is not only he's telling them how carnal they are, but he said, I have to talk to you as if you don't know Christ. I have to talk to you as if you are the natural man who does not have spiritual enlightenment. He notes that they are operating off of a very base instinct of following men. And they are holding in high esteem whoever they were baptized by. So these two chapters, when we get to chapter 3 here, these two chapters, he is trying to make sure that they understand that the only person that should be lifted up and followed is Jesus Christ. We live in an age right now where people are following big name preachers. I'm Joel Osteen's follower, and I follow T.D. Jakes, and we have so many big name preachers that we try to follow. But Paul talks about the carnality of that type of thinking. So what we have to do as Christians is renew our mind so that What we are following is the Bible and Jesus Christ himself. So even if our pastor gets wrong, we would be able to correct that and go to him, talk to him about what he's doing wrong. We should not be so tied up under any minister, preacher, pastor, church leader that we cannot recognize when they are doing wrong. So, one of the things I want to talk about is Christian unity. Now, I want to tell you a story because I think it's very interesting, the history and the story of the Wesleyan or Methodist church, which first started preaching holiness back in the 1700s. If you know the history of the splits and denominations and how they got started, you have to go back to King Henry VIII. There was nothing in the early 1500s or so but the Roman Catholic Church. And if you know the history of King Henry VIII, he wanted to separate from the Catholic Church simply because he wanted to divorce his wife, Catherine, who was not giving him an heir, a male heir. And he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. So many of you have seen probably movies and all these things about Henry VIII. But he started his own church, the Anglican Church or the Church of England. This is what John Wesley was a part of till he died. He was an Anglican minister. And one of the things that he could never reconcile was preaching about the unity of the church and trying to show the world that Christians can get along no matter what they believe, and actually physically separating from the Anglican Church or pulling away from the Anglican Church formally. Doctrinally, certainly, he was at odds with them about a lot of things. And there were quite a few people that were disgruntled and upset with the direction that the Church of England was taking at the time. They wanted more holy living. They wanted more personal accountability with holiness. They saw a lot of discrepancies between the way their leaders lived and what they preached. And they talked openly and publicly about it. And John Wesley was one of the ones that personally studied holiness and was very vocal as a church leader about what he disagreed with the Anglican Church. So they started a movement of holiness that they started to be called Methodists because they were doing something different than the Church of England. They were saying, you all have a method of being saved. So this was very important for two reasons. First, he wanted to be very true to what he was teaching about unity. And a lot of people are confused today about what lines they should draw when it comes to other religions, other teachings, other doctrines. Well, the Bible tells us that God's Spirit dwells in us. And I just want to do a quick word study here because verse 16 and 17 is very important when we talk about unity. The scripture tells us, he uses the word temple, which is naos, and it just means a shrine, a part of the temple where God himself resides. So if we know the Old Testament, where there was the holiest of holies, this is what God is saying about us. When God is saying he resides among us, he is residing in the holiest part of his temple, where he lives, where he dwells, where his presence is. So that's why it is so important for us who are Christians to maintain the presence of God in our lives through prayer and seeking God. verse 17, that it says that if you destroy the work of God, let me go back and make sure that I'm saying this right. So if any man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him. For the temple of God is holy, and that is what you are. If any man destroys, now the word destroys means to corrupt or spoil or ruin the temple of God. Now remember, he's talking about division. If we divide, we are damaging, marring, ruining what God wanted and what he designed, which was oneness. It is important that we understand that we cannot and should not divide over minor things.